I think there's huge opportunity for nuclear in Colorado. It's carbon free, there's no air emissions. But the things that are most attractive to me about it are the energy density, the incredible abundance that it could provide for society, the safety element. A lot of people don't realize that it is the safest form of energy generation. That's what all of the data demonstrates, and including kind of the popular question, well, what about the waste? And I say, well, the waste is often the most valuable part of the whole system because it's hurt very few people ever relative to every other form of energy generation waste.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm co-host Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about a familiar topic on this show, nuclear energy. Longtime listeners know we're obviously big fans. And we talk a little bit about the lack of nuclear experience in Colorado. Nuclear is not a part of our portfolio. And we also like to talk about a lot of groups out there that are doing some work to try to change that, which kind of kicks us off to our guests that we have joining us.
This is actually really exciting. We have Mark Hinaman on the show today. Mark, actually, a longtime oil and gas guy, now has a website called Fire to Fission. I'm going to let him talk about it. He's the expert. The other thing, and this is sort of how I found Mark, was through the Colorado Nuclear Alliance. Yes, there is such a thing. We're super excited about it because we just means we have another group that we can all partner together to bring nuclear to the state of Colorado. With that, we want to welcome Mark to the show. Mark, tell us your background, because you and I have talked, and you've been in the oil and gas business, you've been in the energy space, and how you went from oil and gas and then now into nuclear. Just give us a little background about you.
Yeah, Amy, Jake, thanks so much for having me on, guys. Super stoked to be here and chat. So I like to tell folks that I was kind of born into the oil and gas industry. I grew up in Northwest Colorado, and Dad ran his own natural gas production company. And I went to school to become an engineer and figure out how to build new and different kinds of technologies. Didn't want to go into oil and gas. And then through a lot of discovery in engineering school and a lot of research, I realized, wow, oil and gas is actually like really, really cool. This is really, really helpful for society. And there were excellent jobs as an engineer in Denver. So I spent over a decade in the industry, drilling wells and fracking wells all over the United States, in Colorado, Wyoming, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. And through that experience, I mean, it was awesome, hands-on, big, heavy industrial equipment, fun projects, capital intensive. But over time, I started questioning, well, what else is out there? What else exists? And I was always kind of skeptical of the green revolution and skeptical of a bunch of different technologies. And I like doing my own analysis, my own calculations. And so I looked at building solar farms and building windmills and got involved with young professionals in energy here in Colorado. And through that process, rediscovered nuclear. Had kind of always been aware of nuclear and kind of the fundamentals behind it, but said, wow, this is really awesome. Why aren't we using more of it? So I started to put together a thesis for kind of where nuclear is now and what it could be in the future, which kind of led to the formation of Fire to Fission.
So what do you do with Fire to Fission? What exactly, you're in multiple states, but what is Fire to Fission's role in bringing nuclear into particular states, in particular Colorado?
Sure, yeah. So Fire to Fission, we like to characterize ourselves as a project developer. We're looking at bringing new distributed industrial power generation sources to industrial customers and end users. So we're looking at both natural gas and nuclear solutions that heavy industry users could use. So we've got prospective projects in Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, and we're excited about all of those. We've got a podcast also that we host guests on from the industry and talk about, we like to say, energy dense fuels and how they can better human lives. But we're really excited about the opportunity that kind of nuclear brings both to Colorado and to the U.S.
I just want to ask before we dive a little bit deeper into fire diffusion and the nuclear alliance. Obviously your background's in energy. You're a sharp guy. You have a background in engineering. What is it about nuclear specifically that so attracted you to kind of jump into this work?
Yeah, the list of advantages are long, right? It's people like to say now it's popular to say it's carbon free, there's no air emissions. Um, but the things that are most attractive to me about it are the energy density, the incredible abundance that it could provide for society, the safety element. A lot of people don't realize that it is the safest form of energy generation. That's what all of the data demonstrates, and including kind of the popular question, well, what about the waste? And I say, well, the waste is often the most valuable part of the whole system because it's hurt very few people ever relative to every other form of energy generation waste that exists. So I think there's huge opportunity for nuclear in Colorado.
So, so you do fire diffusion. That's your that's what you do for a living. How did you get into this other entity that you're involved with? And you actually are in a leadership position on it, and it's the Colorado Nuclear Alliance. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so CNA or Colorado Nuclear Alliance formed out of kind of a grassroots effort of individuals that, I mean, honestly started just as a WhatsApp chat from a bunch of nuclear nerds that we were all excited about building nuclear in Colorado. And we said, why aren't people doing this? Why aren't we talking about this more? It seemed very obvious to all of us, and we'd done a bunch of research on the industry and the technologies and everything that it could offer. Several of us had lobbied as individual citizens at the state capitol for some pro-nuclear bills. And one of the first ones that was presented was actually shut down in committee. So it didn't even pass the Energy Committee in the state Senate to go to the floor, but was voted down, which was really surprising to us. I participated in person. I went and testified in person. I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer, right? We were just advocating to add nuclear energy to the clean energy definition in the state, and it was voted down. There were state legislators that were unsure if it was clean and didn't know much about nuclear, which we were baffled by that level of ignorance. And I think that's really turned around. That was kind of in 2022. But it really fired us off to say, man, we can do a lot in this space, and there's an obvious need for education. So we started to get more organized. So we incorporated it as a 501c4 this year, recently elected board of directors and a leadership team, so president, treasurer, and secretary. And yeah, we're continuing to grow. Our vision with Colorado Nuclear Alliance is to create a reliable and abundant clean energy future for Colorado. And our mission is to improve the public's understanding of the crucial role that nuclear energy must play in a prosperous, resilient, and carbon-free Colorado. So we're excited about those things. We're growing. We've got a website up, and you can learn a little bit more there. Or if people are interested in joining or getting involved, then there's a little join form that you can fill out, and we'll get in touch.
Oops, as I say, we'll definitely drop those links in the show notes so folks that are watching this right now can access it there as well. I'm curious, you talked about creating a C4, so I imagine there's going to be a fair bit of advocacy going on, visiting the Capitol, talking to lawmakers. You mentioned briefly testifying on a bill that didn't clear committee. I'm just curious, beyond that, how has the reception been to the message you guys are trying to bring to both lawmakers and just the general public and folks you talk to?
Reception is overwhelmingly positive. I would say 95 to 98% plus of the people that I speak with are at least receptive, if not optimistic and positive about nuclear energy. And that is across the aisle, that's everywhere, right? So I like to say there's this mythology that exists about nuclear where everyone thinks that their neighbor doesn't like it, but they like it, they're for it. And that's really turned around. I think people are starting to realize that from some studies that have happened both at the state and federal level, that this is a really popular topic. It's a popular energy technology, and for good reason. It holds a lot of promise in the future.
So, Mark, I'm curious about something. So you guys have the grassroots support, I've written down, there's a long list of advantages, overwhelmingly positive reception on it. We actually did polling and found that Coloradans support nuclear. And it is, in particular, there are a couple of things that stood out that we thought were interesting. One is that there is a generational gap. So people who are more my age tend to be more afraid of nuclear. They remember Chernobyl, they remember 3 Mile Island. They probably actually went and saw the movie in the movie theaters, China Syndrome. For those of you who don't know what that is, don't bother to watch it. I'll just tell you, it's, Jane Fonda. And the China Syndrome is a nuclear meltdown that supposedly goes to the core of the earth. That's it. Remember when we were kids, you could dig all the way to China. So there's a disconnect generationally. Overwhelming support from a younger generation that, by the way, it is totally plugged in. They know they need power and they aren't afraid of nuclear. So there's that. We also found this interesting connection between people who support wind and they love nuclear too. So, but none of that seems to have reached those who are in charge at the Capitol yet. Curious if you have thoughts about that. And then to the point of, yeah, they do need more education. I think at the Capitol, the other thing is some of the what I would call the problem children, having been around the legislature and having been married to a legislator, I feel like it's okay for me to say that. But some of those problem children have gone on to other things. And I'm hoping that the incoming legislature will be more receptive to nuclear. But I'm curious about just what you think that issue is at the legislature. And then back to Jake, when he was talking about your testimony, were there more people testifying in favor of nuclear than opposed to it?
Great questions. So starting with state capitol level, yeah, like I said, there's some ignorance and education was necessary. So something that our group, the CNA, had done this year was get involved with what they've branded as the Nuclear Caucus at the Capitol. And we helped to organize multiple educational meetings that we hosted just kind of as lunch and learns. You'd have an expert speaker or two come in and give a presentation about a particular topic. We invited every state legislator that we could. It was open to the public. People could come and ask questions. And it was anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. And we'd like to continue that effort. And so if there's folks that want to get involved and want to speak or even just want to learn, then reach out and we'll help you get connected there. So that I think really helped to educate and offer a platform and forum to educate people at the state level. And forgive me, Amy, your other question.
Just about the interesting generational gap. And so it also brings me to, what does your dad think of nuclear? He was an oil and gas guy. There, like I said, there's that generational gap, and also this interesting connection between wind and nuclear that we found in our survey. But I'm just curious if you have found that same generational gap, and then from a personal note, I was just curious if your dad was all on board with nuclear.
Yeah, so the generational piece jives with what we've seen. Generally, younger people support it more because, yeah, there's not that hangover from the branding that was associated with it decades ago. But my dad in particular is all for it. I'll try and do my best impression of him, but he's always like, I don't understand. Anytime that there's, it comes up, it's been on subs and aircraft carriers for years, and none of those people have been hurt. Like, it's super safe. This is crazy. It's crazy that we're not using it. So,
well, we'll have to send him the link to see if he thinks you're spot on.
Yeah, if he did it justice.
Yeah. No, he'll know that I was referring to him. Yeah. So. But he is an oil and gas guy, and you bring up an interesting point, Amy. A colleague of mine actually put together what we branded as, and actually a fellow board member on the board, Doug Sandridge, put together a proclamation called Oil and Gas Executives for Nuclear Energy. And we got over 100 executives across the United States to sign this two-page pro-nuclear proclamation stating that we want to build more nuclear. And these were all oil and gas executives. Actually, the first signatory on that document was Chris Wright, the new
Yeah, we
Energy
were.
I was just
Secretary.
about to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really exciting, and because there was this, I guess, opinion in the world that oil and gas was just out to defeat nuclear, which was entirely not true. Many of the people in oil and gas are very technical and understand the benefits and everything associated with it, and yeah, they were excited to see more of it built.
Yeah, in particular, focus on energy dense fuels. You could see the crossover applying nicely there. Outside of the state capitol, I'm just curious where you see opportunities for nuclear. Where is the fertile ground in Colorado for nuclear? And sort of to that end, have you been following the things going on in Pueblo, the active discussions about what to do with Comanche 3? And I know there's that working group down there talking about nuclear. I'm just curious what your take on all that is.
Yeah, so I might sound like I've drank a lot of the Kool-Aid, but I sincerely believe this, that we could put nuclear power plants just about anywhere, and they can be used for most or all power generation needs. Yeah, Pueblo's a great site to replace Comanche Peak. The site in Northwest Colorado, the Craig and Hayden stations that are shutting down, we've been involved and talked to a lot of people up there. I don't want to speak for them directly, even though I'm from Northwest Colorado and I've engaged with a lot of those people, but there's significant interest and people want to figure out if they could build more reactors up there. We've heard interest for multiple members across the state, multiple communities across the state to be involved in various parts of the nuclear fuel supply chain. So people want to mine more uranium. There's a refinement process after you get the uranium out of the ground that it has to go through to make it useful to put in reactors and actually form it into the fuel. We need more of that capacity in the United States, and there's communities that are interested in building some of that capacity if they can get those projects started and put together. Some of the new advanced reactor designs you could put almost anywhere. That you need a very small footprint, a couple of acres, 3-4 acres, and they could be close to cities, close to communities. Yeah, and I think the end use application, right? That in northern Colorado and Weld County, there's a lot of oil and gas facilities that need a lot of power. Those industrial uses could be electrified through the utilization of some of these advanced reactors, and that's something that Fire to Fission does. And so, yeah, shameless plug. If anyone is interested in that, reach out. We'll help you figure that out and digest it. But data centers moving to the state, there's huge growth in that sector, and nuclear, from all the announcements that folks have seen this fall, is going to play a huge role in that. So.
Hey, Mark, how about the pushback that doesn't matter what the state does until the federal government gets its act together and reduces permitting for nuclear, none of this is going to move. So why waste your time on it?
That's an often cited talking point, and my response is, I don't think that argument's super warranted. The permitting time frame is, in my opinion, too long for new nuclear power plants, and the requirements are not equitable compared to all other energy generation sources. So I'm a fan of reducing the permitting requirements, but as they're set right now, that it's not insurmountable. So estimate 32 months or 42 months for a new NRC construction permit and operating license, which is significantly longer than some other permitting requirements. But there are people and there are companies that are going through the process right now and will continue to, in my opinion, be successful in that process. I think there's going to be a lot more announcements in kind of the later 2020s about people getting permits and getting approved. And if there's any reform, I hope it happens to not disrupt that current permitting process, but only enhance it and accelerate it. So and to put in perspective, right, a new oil and gas well drilled and permitted at the federal level might take a year to receive a permit versus that 3.5-year permit timing for new nuclear power plants.
I don't know if you all saw this morning, but President-elect Trump gave some remarks when he rang the opening bell. and one of them was about nuclear, and he said, and you'll have to forgive me if I don't get this exactly right, but it was something because we have to reduce the permitting time and everything. He said, I think a week would be long enough. Okay. Um, anyway, so but you're absolutely right, and actually, I think a year permitting for a new
Well, my
well
dad
is
says,
far too
in
long.
Colorado, you used to be able to receive a permit to drill an oil and gas well in Colorado in a day.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
fastest permit that I've ever received to drill an oil and gas well was 1.5 business days in Texas. So that gives you the sense of scale and time scale that we're dealing with here, right? These are very well understood technologies. They have an excellent track record of performing safely and reliably. Yeah, the permitting time frame is too long.
and I think the other thing too, the other reason why I don't think that particular argument holds water is because in particular in Colorado, Colorado essentially thumbed its nose at the feds over pot and legalized pot, and as a number of states have done. So please don't talk to me about how the feds are stopping you. The feds, I mean, I get that they control part of the permitting process, but it does send a message if a number of states start embracing nuclear and finally put that pressure on the feds to to get their act together and reduce the permitting time. I am actually optimistic about that. Hopefully, over the next 2 years, that we get that time reduced significantly.
Yeah, there's a
Well,
little bit
Amy,
of
it's funny that you sorry to cut you off, Jay, because it's funny that you mentioned that because the two states to our north and to our south, Wyoming and Texas, have taken somewhat of that approach. I attended the Texas Nuclear Summit a couple of weeks ago, and they had several excellent recommendations about what to do to help the industry move forward, including some kind of new certifications. And so they as a state are taking on more of an ownership role and being proactive and figuring out what they can do to help industry move forward. Wyoming, very similar. Their Wyoming Energy Authority has provided funds and is partnering with multiple private companies and public companies to motivate investment and new industry to come to their state. So, Colorado, we have, in my opinion, the best of both worlds, better mountains than Wyoming, and certainly some better attributes than Texas. And so I think we could definitely attract talent and industry to build the economy here in Colorado and help build this industry here.
No, it's a great point. I was just going to point out Utah is doing something similar as well. We've covered that on a previous episode. One last question before I kick it over to Amy for the takeaways as we're coming up on time here. I did just want to ask kind of a nerdy question that you see a lot in the pro-nuclear community. Are you more bullish on sort of so-called SMRs and microreactors than large-scale reactors? Do you see a role for our traditional large-scale reactors going forward, or do you think it's all going to be the small space?
I know people and companies who are actively working to build all of them,
Yeah.
and I am bullish on all of them. I'm bullish that AP1000s will get built. I'm bullish that X Energy's reactor and Kairos and NuScale and others will get built. And I'm bullish that the microreactors will get built. There are applications for all of them to be used. Like the opportunity is huge. It's hard to understate. I know I've said it several times already just in this discussion, but it's going to happen.
Let 1,000 reactors bloom. I like it. Kick it over to you, Amy, for some takeaways for our listeners.
First of all, we'll drop both websites in the show notes so that everybody has those. And I'm just smiling because I'm so excited about somebody's optimism about nuclear. Like I'm almost giddy. Well, I am giddy about this. So I'm thrilled about that. I love that you're bullish, and let that be contagious. So takeaways on this. One, there are plenty of reasons why Colorado should have nuclear and needs nuclear. We have to have nuclear in our portfolio. If the state is going to decarbonize, we absolutely have to have it. So number one, we have to have it. There are plenty of reasons to do it. If we don't do it, this is my second takeaway, Colorado is going to be left behind. We will be behind states, all of our neighboring states will be behind really probably most of the rest of the country. So plenty of reasons to have it. If we don't have it, we're going to be left behind. And then, as always, if we don't get a generator, or have talk to Mark about some project management that you might need. But yeah, I'm excited about this. It's been a great topic, and Mark, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Mark. That does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw here, head on over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple. So you can check us out there. And if you want to suggest future show topics or suggest future great guests like Mark here, you can send those over to info@powergab.org. We'd love to hear from our listeners. But until next time, we'll see you guys.